Scott, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Sure, glad to be here.
So we sponsored the conference out in Austin, and I heard some of the talks there on the cell tower issue and the microwave energy issue, the health effects, all of that. But this is a big deal for you. You guys are kind of only ones fighting this. Am I right, or is there other groups?
Well, there are many groups. We're kind of the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Children's Health Defense tends to have a few more resources than many of the other local grassroots organizations, but
Yeah.
we're actually part of a coalition of over 100 groups, whether
Okay.
they be health groups, environmental groups, or even those worried about the privacy and surveillance concerns.
So I just got a text from Miriam. I'm just going to send her real quick the link again, just so she has that. Stand by with me 1 second, please. So what are the main risks of the cell? Because a lot of people don't know about this, Scott.
The federal government has known for a very long time
Mm-hmm.
that radio frequency radiation and indeed all kinds of electromagnetic radiation have a biological effect.
Yeah.
The military learned about it soon after World War II from the radars and
Mm-hmm.
other things. But it has been repressed. I mean, gosh, your audience is going to be shocked to know that the federal government is and others are trying to manipulate information, news, and the narrative. Oh my
Yeah.
God, never seen that before. But in the last 20 years, it has become even more evident. The science is just conclusively showing now that exposure to this artificial electromagnetic radiation, and remember, we evolved around electromagnetic radiation. The sun is the biggest
Sure.
radiator out there. But we evolved and are able to handle that. Indeed, our bodies need that radiation.
Hmm.
But this artificial stuff is not something that we evolved to deal with. And the science shows that there is a biological response to artificially generated, whether it be from a cell tower, a cell phone, a Wi-Fi router, those little things you see in people's ears all the times. All of this emits radiation that at the cellular level evokes a biological response.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And while the government has hastened to encourage the development of things like therapies that use RF radiation to stimulate bone growth or other things, it has repressed the fact that it can also be very harmful. We now know that up to 30% of the population has an adverse response to this radiation. 30% of the population, and up to 0.5% of them, and by the way, that's all, that's millions of people,
Yeah.
suffer greatly. There's even a name for it now, EMRS. It's a sensitivity to electromagnetic radiation. There are lots of people who have finally realized what it is that's caused it, but there are many more who don't know why they just feel bad. And there's substantial overlap in the symptoms to causes from other things, including the vaccination.
Yeah.
So it's hard to identify sometimes why people aren't sleeping, why they're not able to think as clearly, why they just feel bad. But ultimately, it becomes apparent. You put down your phone, you go somewhere where there's not very good cell coverage, and after a day or so, you feel much better. And then you go back into this environment and you feel terrible again. So finally, the light bulb clicks on. Well, for almost 5 years now, Defense, along with all of our other grassroots organizations, and I see Miriam, she'll be able to speak about them in a moment.
Yeah.
We've been trying to get the public educated and our federal agencies better informed and get them to face up to the fact that this stuff can indeed be harmful and is harmful, and something needs to be done about it. Miriam, I'm going to hand off to you.
So let me ask you, Miriam, we've been involved with CHD for years. I mean, we're part of the lawsuit against Trusted Health or Trusted News Initiative. And I've seen, as you mentioned at the conference, CHD is not just about just the specifics of children's health, but health really for humanity. So this has become a big issue for CHD. Am I right? Or am I getting that wrong?
No, absolutely. You get that right. I mean, it all sort of like started, with I think what was then called the 5G initiative or something like that, with Daphne Talkover and the FCC lawsuit that Scott was involved. And then it sort of like just, snowballed from there, because it's with other issues as well, right? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you realize that how pervasive and how widespread the impact really is, and how much science is out there, and how much it is suppressed, and how much it is manipulated, and how much industry controls and influences decision makers and regulatory agencies, then it fits right into CHD's work.
Yeah.
And so, we've been, EMR, artificial man-made RF radiation, is one of the fastest growing environmental toxins of our time. And we are sort of like stumbling into this like very carelessly, right? Like everybody's using their cell phones. We're rolling out this infrastructure. There's 5G everywhere. And when you dig a little deeper, you realize that there is really not that much ongoing study, safety testing that industry or government is doing to make sure that the path that we're on is actually sustainable. And so I feel very strongly that CHD, has to step up and step into fill that void, as we have done with other spaces.
Definitely. Scott, what got me at the conference was it showed, I guess, and I don't know who put this together, but images of, blood vessels, et cetera, next to cell phones. And you could see the damage, like real time, happening to the human body. People aren't aware of that, are they?
No, they're not, although awareness is starting to break through. That was Dr. Rob Brown with Environmental Health Trust who put that together, and EHT has done a great job assembling and indeed even creating a lot of research on this breakthrough stuff. We're happy to work with them, and we were co-plaintiffs with them in that 2020 decision. But it's not just what it does to blood. It is neurological. The National Toxicology Program found that it can cause certain kinds of cancer. There's just a wide range. There's a constellation of symptoms and conditions that this leads to. Everybody responds differently.
So, Miriam, there's the phones, but there's also the towers. I mean, I also got my eyes open to that. Tell us about the danger that a cell phone tower creates near your bedroom. There was a story of a tower going up next to a kid's bedroom, and all of a sudden they're violently ill.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, cell phones and cell towers use RF radiation to communicate. And we have done a lot of education around the dangers of RF radiation in general. But when you think about cell phones or computers or even children and screen time, you can control that as a parent. It is voluntary exposure to a certain extent. You can turn your children's phones off. You can make sure you don't sleep next to them. You can turn your Wi-Fi off at night, etc. When you live next to a cell tower, this exposure becomes involuntary because you are now being radiated 24/7 and it never stops. And so the example that you mentioned before, like is Amelia Ghilardi's example in Pittsfield, they activated a cell tower, and within moments after activation, like those children started being sick, dizzy, tinnitus, vomiting, like couldn't, focus, had headaches, etc. And as soon as they left the house, went to school, etc., if they eventually had to leave their house, they got constructively evicted, those symptoms were gone. And so they, put the dots together and started advocating. And that is unfortunately something that we hear from across the country, whether it is children or adults that are being impacted by cell towers nearby, whether it is wildlife and the trees. We hear from a lot of people who live close to cell towers, you know, the squirrels left, the groundhogs left, the trees started dying. And you know, so it's aside from what a cell tower does to your neighborhood, aside from that, a cell tower is industrial infrastructure. It destroys the look and feel of your neighborhood. And a lot of people who, you know, have cell towers built, like they don't want to go to those playgrounds where the cell towers are on. They don't want to send their kids to schools. So it fundamentally changes the nature of a community. And we are, you know, when CHD in general, I think, focuses a lot on involuntary exposure to toxins and informed consent. And I think that's where the cell tower issue is really at the forefront of what we do in the EMR and wireless program, because you don't have informed consent. The exposure is not voluntary. And the truth is, once a cell tower is up, there's virtually nothing you can do. So even if you get sick, like Amelia and her family, they've been fighting to get back into their homes for 2.5 years now.
Wow.
And they're still not there, right? Court cases take forever. There's a lot of federal protection. There's liability shields. There's no one you can sue. There's nowhere you can go. And it's just, you know, that's why we encourage people to become active when a cell tower is first proposed in their neighborhood, when they can still oppose it. But once it's up and you do start getting sick, or there is negative impact on your neighborhood and on your environment, and that's that.
Well, Scott, what can people do if there's a notice that a cell tower is going up near their playground or their school, or and are there any regulations preventing that? I guess it depends on the jurisdiction, right?
Yes, every local jurisdiction has a different set of rules, but they all follow basically the same path. When this kind of industrial infrastructure is proposed to be placed, especially in a residential area or perhaps by a school or a playground, typically there is some kind of notice. There will be a sign posted at the site. People within 1,000 feet, sometimes 500 feet of the site, get notice mailed to them. Sometimes it only appears in the newspaper, but there is typically a notice posted that the proposal has been made. And it's at that point that people need to get involved. The first thing they should do is go to stop5g.org. We've collected a whole bunch of resources that help people kind of understand what's going on and what they can do. We provide a bunch of tools for people, education materials, organization materials, kind of an explanation of the process. And they could reach out to us, and we provide consulting services. But the main thing is you've got to get to work almost immediately, because this process is time limited. There's a very specific period that is allowed for this to begin and end. And you got to move fast. You got to get a hold of your local zoning authority and say, wait a minute, I want to participate. Let me see the application. I don't think this belongs here. It's ugly. It'll reduce my property values. I bought this house so that I could see the mountain or the ocean. And this ugly upside down toilet brush is going to be right where I sit on the porch every morning and drink my coffee.
Yeah.
You know, these are all valid concerns, aside from the significant health effects.
I'm watching my friends gain more and more weight. And then eventually, I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke. I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition-specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
and it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition, and sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back. Cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Effects. You get organized, you reach out, you speak to your neighbors, you call, you write your local zoning authority, you put in your opposition, you participate in the process. And our experience is that if enough people get involved and share their concerns with their local representatives, they can have a meaningful impact.
Right. Can I add to that?
Yeah,
Todd?
go ahead.
Because
Yeah.
I think, we spoke about the health and environmental impacts, but what most people don't know is that local zoning authorities and local authorities, when they are faced with a cell tower application, they're not allowed to take health and environmental effects into consideration. So they are stuck with the reasons that Scott outlined, right? Like aesthetics, property values, fire and safety code, because of, Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that specifically preempted that area. And we're also very aggressively working on overturning that and making.
I was going to ask. I mean,
know,
that can't be constitutional, right? I mean, you could pass a law that says you can put a product out that is going to harm you and you can't do anything about it. That doesn't seem, realistic. What are your chances of overturning that, do you think?
You go, Scott.
Well, we think there are very significant constitutional issues, and I don't want to go all lawyer on everyone.
Yeah.
But if you just think about it, that is a disabling provision. It says the most important thing, we're going to pretend you can't, you pay no attention to this thing. Something that directly impacts everybody, their health, and indeed their property, is just out of bounds. And we think that Congress does not have the authority to so disable state and local authorities from considering this issue, nor can it just take away individual property and due process rights in this fashion. And we intend to challenge it.
Wow, fantastic. So I saw also in the presentation at the conference in Austin that they're moving from the big cell towers to a lot of small cell towers, like all the way down your street and around your house. And tell us, Miriam, do you want to talk about that, about what's coming?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the reality of sort of and why the initiative is called Stop 5G is because these new generations of wireless communications, they use higher and higher frequencies. So they are transmitting data much faster. And the idea is that you have sort of connectivity everywhere you go. And they're great for mobility, but they come at a cost because the higher the frequency, the less far the frequency can travel. And so you essentially need receivers and transmitters every 500 to 1,000 feet. And so this infrastructure moves much closer to the end user. There's also a big push, and the Defender has reported on that, by the wireless industry to provide wireless internet, wireless home internet, right? Where you would no longer have your cable from Verizon Fios or whatever, Optimum come to your house, but where it's essentially a box at your house, and then that box connects wirelessly to the internet provider. And so both of those new technologies require the infrastructure to be very close, and it increases the amount of radiation, but it also has, a tremendous potential for abuse and surveillance and data collection that I don't think people are ready for. I don't think people would consent to if they knew. But it's sort of like a stealth rollout, right? Because for small cells, or smaller cell towers, there's even less that you can do, and there's less notice requirements, and they just pop up. And so it's very important that people get informed, get organized, and make sure they know what's going on in their neighborhoods.
We have somebody who at CDM who lived in China for working for us over there for a while, and it's a thing already over there. I mean, the complete surveillance, and because you're right, it's associated with that. Scott, what about immunity? I want to go back to that because in Georgia, for instance, we had with our team there, with our paper there, bills passed through the Georgia state legislature that prevented any action against. It gave immunity to pesticide companies, and one of them was ChemChina. There seems to be a theme here where they're giving immunity to any adverse reaction to companies poisoning the population, essentially, across different sectors.
You're exactly right. But the important difference here is this wasn't ever done by statute. Congress didn't provide express statutory immunity. The FCC itself has never held in any order that a wireless company is immune from suit and damages when they hurt somebody. It's a judicially created doctrine. Nonetheless, several courts have ruled that if you are injured by a cell tower or even a cell phone, you are not allowed to bring what we call a tort suit, a personal injury suit against the wireless companies. Instead, the courts have said you get to go to the FCC and ask it to deal with the problem. And of course,
kind of like vaccines, right?
Well, yeah, except here it's really clear that the FCC is not going to do anything. They've absolutely refused to do anything.
Wow.
They were told by a federal appeals court 4 years ago to look at the health and environmental effects of RF radiation. They were mandated to take it all under consideration again and look at the issues. And they've been sitting on that for 4 years now. They're not going to do anything because they're controlled by the industry.
Wow. So it used to be that if, like with medicine or whatever, if you, it was kind of a check against abusive behavior or abusive practice because you had a court system that would counter them economically. That seems to be gone in this area.
It is gone. You know, this is one of the problems of what we call the administrative state. Many people think that it's a good thing that the government is supposed to step in and protect the public using its federal agencies. The problem is that the agencies end up being captured by the folks they're supposed to regulate, and they end up protecting the industry against the public. Yeah. If we still had the traditional forms of judicial relief for things like personal injury, trespass, nuisance, you know, in the old days, if somebody released a chemical that came to my property, I could sue them in court.
Yeah.
Now, if they have a federal or state permit to release a chemical that goes onto my property, I can't bring that kind of action. I have to go to the agency that gave the permit to begin with. And they don't typically have the right to give me damages. There are exceptions, but typically they don't.
Wow.
I think there's also something particular about technology because it is sort of like commonly, perceived as this massive good, right? Connectivity, and we all want more of it. And it doesn't help that like RF radiation is not your typical toxins, right? Like you can't smell it, you can see it. It's very hard to sort of like conceptualize. And we realized that when we brought novel concepts to the courts and the judges asked questions of like, well, how is it that like this makes you sick, but not nobody else? And like, how come you get sick from this cell tower, but not every? So there's just like a huge knowledge gap, and people cannot imagine that the things we hold so close and dear and are addicted to, right, like have the potential to harming us. So it is, there's an additional cognitive dissonance that we see play out in the population, but also in the courts, because judges are humans, right?
Sure.
And it's very hard to sort of like think about what would be the ramification. Well, what's the impact if you actually admit that this is something that makes up to 30% of the general population sick? Like, just think about it, right? And so judges are very reluctant to sort of like go into that, and they defer to the FCC because they're like, I don't understand it. I don't understand how this frequency works. I don't understand the biological impact. So it's much easier to defer to the agency. to just be like, you handle it because you're the subject matter expert, right? So it's a bit of a special case. And we don't have a federal compensation program in the wireless space, which is, as much as we criticize, the vaccine injury compensation program, there's no such thing. There's no VAERS. There's no compensation program in the wireless space. If you get harmed, you're really pretty much on your own.
So last question, Scott. The Chevron decision, does that impact this at all?
It does.
Okay. In
It
a good
does.
way?
Yes, actually, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the current rules and practices, and indeed the court decisions providing immunity, are based on the old Chevron doctrine notion of deference to administrative interpretations of their statute and the purposes and objectives behind it.
Mm-hmm.
With the elimination of the Chevron deference doctrine, the courts are now supposed to, and I emphasize supposed to, I want to reaffirm what Miriam said, they're still very reluctant, but they are now at least supposed to take an independent look at these things. They're supposed to be judges again. And so, yeah, it is significant. There are other very recent Supreme Court decisions that very much assist our upcoming challenges. The right to a jury trial under the 7th Amendment. You don't get one of those at an agency.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court has showed that it at least understands that we've been ruled now by this administrative state, and it is typically just served to take away the individual rights of the people.
Miriam, anything else before we go?
I just want to encourage everyone to visit stop5g.org and 704nomore.org. There is a lot of information on both of those websites. There are action alerts that we're currently running, steps that people can take. I would also encourage everyone to follow us on social media at Stop5G and at 704nomore. We're really trying to get everybody organized and get the most important information out there so that, people can start pushing back where needed.
Well, media is a big problem, and that's why we're in this administrative state, because it was controlled for so long. But what about you, Scott? Anything else you want to get out?
Yes, the Federal Communications Commission has recently opened a new proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
Since we have begun to be more successful at the local zoning, fighting these permits, the commission has decided it needs to help its industry friends. And so it's got a proposal out to basically strip away all local zoning authority and eliminate public participation. We put out some action alerts on this. We are encouraging people to write to the commission and suggest that it not do these things. This is a local decision, placement of these facilities, control over, what they should look like, the conditions they should operate. These are all traditionally local concerns, and they should not be decided at the FCC.
Completely agree. Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of that across different sectors happening. I'll just throw this up. This is Miriam just sent me this. FCC moves to silence communities and flood the country with cell towers. So you got to get involved, I guess, is the key point there. Thanks, guys, very much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having us.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.